Welcome to the Empathy Avengers podcast, where we put empathy into action.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Empathy Avengers podcast. Today, we have a national treasure with us. Craig Unger is the author of 6 books, including The House of Putin, The House of Trump, American Kompromat, and Den of Spies. Mr. Unger was the editor at Vanity Fair, is a journalist writing currently on American Kompromat, his Substack. Craig, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So we are a little bit fangirling out here. We're thrilled to have you. And you are basically the guru on the Russian influence of America, like what's been going on. So can we just have you give your elevator spiel for as if you're meeting somebody new, like with all these amazing books you've written and all of the knowledge. And honestly, you were like the first person to sound the alarm about this whole thing. So kudos to you, and please enlighten our audience about everything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the introduction. You know, one of the most disturbing things of all this is all this happened more or less in plain sight. And when I started investigating, it was just as Trump was winning the election, and I started hearing all this Trump-Russia rumors and so forth. But one of the first things I did was there are open source databases for real estate, for example. And there's one called Street Easy. It's free. And it lists all the purchases and sales of all apartment units, all residences in New York State, and perhaps many more states as well. But I went to see what happened to Donald Trump's property. And when you do that, you suddenly see all these Russian names and you wonder, what the hell are they doing? And then I start Googling those Russian names. And what happens, and some of this had been reported here and there and had been forgotten. But for example, you could see that in 1984, a man named David Bogadin, and if you Google him, you'll find FBI files saying that he was part of the Russian mafia. And in 1984, he went into Trump Tower with $6 million in cash and met with Donald Trump and said, I'll take 5 condos. That, in effect, was money laundering, and it was the first of many such episodes. And all in all, it wasn't just me. There were investigations, I believe, by Reuters and BuzzFeed and so forth that showed at least 1,500 condos. And if you know what a condo in New York, Manhattan goes for, it's generally several $1 million. But over 1,000 of them, costing at least $1.5 billion, were coming from Russians in a way that strongly suggested money laundering. That is, these were all cash transactions. They were being sold by anonymous beneficiaries, as it is limited liability companies or so forth, that hid the name of the owner. And this was, in effect, money laundering. And so you could see the Russians wooing Trump very, very early on. I also showed how when he went to Moscow in 1987, the trip was organized by Intourist, which is well known to be a front for the KGB. I should also add that the Russian mobsters who were buying those condos from Trump, the Russian mafia is very, very different from the Italian-American mafia, which was always at war with the FBI. In Russia, it's the opposite. The Russian mafia is part of Russian intelligence. It works hand in glove with the KGB and its successors. So suddenly I found at least 13 Russian mobsters who owned or lived in condos in Trump Tower, and they have ties to Russian intelligence. Think what a breach of national security that is, just alone. And it was just extraordinary. So that's how I got started on this. And there's a lot more there, of course, but it's clear to me that that the Russian mafia and Russian intelligence was cultivating Donald Trump as an asset, and that we now have an asset of Russian intelligence who is president of the United States.
That is
Terrifying.
crazy. Yeah, and terrifying. We learned a little bit about the origins of Trump visiting in the 80s Moscow and then coming back to put it in the full page ad of the New York Times about kind of anti-NATO propaganda and stuff like that. And he actually ran for president in the 80s. So that Minnie and I were just reminded by doing research for this show. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. Almost no one remembers this, and you guys were probably little toddlers if that. But remember it. It was in the New York Times, and in 1987, as I just said, it was really the KGB who brought Trump to Moscow. And he was there. He also went to St. Petersburg, then known as Leningrad. But when he returned, he started doing something extraordinary. In the 80s, and I'd been at New York Magazine in those times, so I saw Trump's ascent as a real estate developer and as a public figure in New York. He was not yet really known nationally, even at that time. But he was sort of the kind of guy, he would call up the New York Post, which of course was our down market tabloid, and he would pretend he was a publicist named John Barron and would talk about how how Donald Trump was going out with all these new hot babes, and that would be in the gossip columns again and again. And suddenly he goes to Moscow and he returns saying he's an expert on foreign policy and he should be negotiating the strategic arms limitation talks with Mikhail Gorbachev, who was then General Secretary of the Soviet Union. And he was starting to run for president. And while he does this, he put out a full-page ad in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. And I printed it in my book. I forget whether it was in House of Trump or in American Kompromat, but it's reprinted in one of those, and you can actually see it online if you Google and start looking for it. But what he was promoting were talking points for the KGB. And essentially it was an argument that American foreign policy, we need to get tough with our allies. And he was talking about both Japan and European allies and how they need to pay more for NATO and so forth. And what was truly extraordinary is that one of my sources, a man named Yuri Shvets, who was a major in the KGB in the 80s, he worked out of what was known as Washington Station, where he was trying to recruit Americans to spy for the Soviet Union. And Yuri Shvets went back to Yasenevo, which was the center of the KGB's foreign policy intelligence, and they were all celebrating because the Active Measures Directorate had had a big success in that they had gotten an American to take KGB talking points and print them in the New York Times, Washington Post, and so forth. And this was the very ad that had been paid for by Donald Trump.
Wow.
Well, and another name that kept coming up or has come up quite a lot in this story is Dana Rohrabacher. Could you talk a little bit about who he was and what he did with the Russians?
Well, I wish I knew a little more about him, but he was always known as Vladimir Putin's favorite congressman. And he was one of the first in the Republican Party to go really pro-Russian, very, very pro-Russian. And, to someone of my age, I grew up during the Cold War, and the Republican Party was so anti-Soviet Union. It is unbelievable, and anti-Russian. And here you have a guy from, I forget which congressional district he's from. You probably know.
He was from San Diego. He was actually my effing congressperson for a little bit.
He was there, though, as a very conservative Republican, as I recall. And for them to suddenly come out and be so pro-Russian was sort of insane. I don't really know what, if anything, he got in return for that. I did find out that there were, if you remember, Tom DeLay, who was, I think, Speaker of the House, or was he a minority leader for the Republicans back in the 90s. And he got major contributions in one of those super PACs from the Russians that came after he visited Moscow. And you started to see the influx of money into the Republican Party from Russia. I think one of the great problems, one thing I keep writing about is how our checks and balances have been eroded again and again. And one of the worst examples of that is, of course, Citizens United decision, which treats corporations as people and allows money to come into the political parties from all sorts of different ways. So you ended up with people like Leonard Blavatnik, who has dual citizenship. He has both Russian and American citizenship. And that means he can make campaign contributions, and yet he's a Russian oligarch. So there's another way in which you have direct influx of funds from Putin and his allies into the Republican Party.
You mentioned Rohrabacher was Putin's favorite congressman. And I've also heard recently that Tulsi Gabbard is known as Putin's girlfriend, which is very disturbing.
Right. Well, Tulsi Gabbard has done a lot of stuff that, I've been wanting to dig into her. There have been recent stories coming about her and her affiliation, I believe, with a sect related to Hare Krishna. And all this is that the Russians have used these cults as a way of sort of influencing some of the most influential people in America. And she was, of course, director of national intelligence, and she just stepped down, but she's putting out a lot of stories that seem to be very, very pro-Russian.
Well, and I mean, I'm a cult survivor. I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness and got wrapped up in QAnon, and Jim Stewartson was actually who helped me get out. But you're absolutely right. During COVID, we saw that explosion of QAnon propaganda. And, do you think a lot of that is coming from Russia?
Yes, again, I hesitate to go into everything when I don't have specifics, but, I just read a recent report that both with Facebook and Twitter, now known as X, over 80% of the posts came from bots, most of which presumably were run by the Russians. And it seems to me it's pretty clear that the Russians have refined this to a fine art. Another thing I've written about is hybrid warfare. Americans don't seem to realize we're at war with the Russians. And this is a war without bombs or bullets or boots on the ground. And instead, a lot of it's done through active measures that includes disinformation. And with social media, it's far, far easier for the Russians to have a huge impact than it used to be in the days of print. So that's one thing that's very, very disturbing. I mean, if you go back to the 2016 election, you may remember a time when Paul Manafort, who of course was Trump's campaign manager, and before that, let's step back a moment. Paul Manafort had been a campaign manager for President Yanukovych in Ukraine, and that was a way he was installing really a Putin stooge as president in Ukraine through all sorts of disinformation and stuff. And Manafort companies received $75 million from the Russian oligarchs. And he was working with a man named Konstantin Kilimnik, who was part of Russian military intelligence. At one point late in the campaign, they met in a cigar club called the Havana Room in Manhattan, and Manafort gave internal polling numbers of all the swing states to Konstantin Kilimnik, and it later ends up in the hands of the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, which is another Russian organism for active measures. And suddenly those bots go into action in all the swing states, distributing disinformation just before the election. And that is one way the Russians have worked with Trump. And you can be sure something similar or even worse will be probably happening in the upcoming midterm elections.
Yeah, for sure. But let's go back. I want to stick with the 2016 leading up to that election, because then we had the October surprise. We had the Access Hollywood tape released, which was bad for Trump. And then literally a few hours later, there was this huge dump that came from WikiLeaks. And I'm sure you can lay out how that kind of came about.
Right. Well, what a coincidence. I mean, what can I say? I mean, one of the way my methodologies for working is just I use a lot of timelines of chronologies. And when you see things happening at certain points, you start to wonder about causality. Why the hell did that happen when? Why did A happen before B? And this, again, is one of those things where it looks like the Russians had all these emails, and just when they really needed them, they started to release them to take all the heat off the famous episode in which Trump used rather vulgar terms to describe how he approached women.
Which we now know is basically true because of Eugene Carroll and all these other people, survivors who have been victims of Donald Trump, grabbing him by the... So yeah. And then I wanted to mention, I think it's Vitaly Churkin was a Russian ambassador deputy ambassador to the Soviet Union. He was with the KGB. And there was a secret meeting that happened with Epstein that we now know about from the Epstein drop that happened, I think, that same day, right? The Access Hollywood day. In theory, we don't know for sure, but it seems like that meeting might have led because Vitaly Churkin was in touch with WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, or Peter Thiel was maybe the link there. He was at that meeting, as was Epstein and this Russian deputy ambassador. Is
Right.
that
And Churkin died rather suddenly
yeah?
and
Tell us
convenient.
about that.
And it happens a lot that there are a number of mysterious deaths that it's very hard to pin down, but they sure do happen a lot. And there have been enough that have been pinned down. I mean, we know about the death of Navalny, of Litvinenko, the murder attempts in Salisbury in England, and so forth. Paul Klebnikov was an American journalist in Moscow who was gunned down. He was with Forbes magazine in Russia. So this has happened an awful lot. And, it happens so often that it's really hard to track down and nail down every single one of them.
Yeah, for sure. But very suspicious in my mind as well. So something's going on there. Yeah. And there were 1,200 references with Churkin and the Epstein files in the most recent drop. So that's a lot. That's a lot of interaction. Okay. So we were talking about Dana Rohrabacher as Putin's favorite congressperson. But what about Laura Loomer? She seems to be buddies with something. And she's the one that gave the tour a few months ago of all those Russian oligarchs who were previously banned from entering the United States. And now they're like running around the White House or, the Capitol building with Laura Loomer showing them around. They're kind of like, ooh, look at our pretty buildings here in Washington, D.C.
Right. Well, just this week, I was reading, I think it was in Substack, but that Laura Loomer seems to have done a 180 and now she's supporting Ukraine. And this is very suddenly. But I can't speak to it directly from my own reporting, but I was reading it in one of the social media.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. I'll have to look that up too because I don't want to. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm still suspicious about her and some of these other flippers, but whatever, we'll see. Well, then the other plug I wanted to mention was that dinner. Okay, so this is actually going back to the 80s, I think, or maybe the 90s when there was the dinner in Moscow with Trump and Jill Stein was there.
She was in my class at Harvard or a year behind me or so.
Oh.
But I did not really know her, I have to say. I mean, I think this is typical Russia is that they start wooing people like that who, for all I know, think it's perfectly harmless to go over to Moscow and have dinner with Vladimir Putin. How exciting and all that. But what it does is it makes them completely uncritical of him. It's sort of a different version of what we know as access journalism. And I think one of the worst things in American journalism is whether it's the New York Times or one of the major television networks or cable outlets, everyone feels they need to have access to Donald Trump. And the only way you're going to get that access is by being really, really nice to him. I mean, look what Pete Hegseth's regulations in the Pentagon are absurd if you want to do serious journalism. And to me, it's far better to forego that kind of access. And what journalists should be, their first priority should be to deliver the truth. It's not to quote verbatim lies from Donald Trump. I mean, another form of it is, we call it both sidesism. That is, you have to give equal attention. Be fair to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get the Republicans and the Democrats. Well, if one party says 2 and 2 is 4, and another party says it's 127, the truth is not in between. The story should be one party is out of its mind. And I think we need more critical reporting along those lines.
There's a great quote from another journalist that says, if one person says it's raining and another person says it's not your job to give both sides. It's your job to look out the window and see if it's fucking raining and tell the truth.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's good. I like that a lot. Yeah, let's stick with the media. I think, we're in also a critical time for what is it called? The fourth estate. The media is supposed to be the extra check on all of the checks and balances of our government.
Right.
And that's failing too, clearly.
Right.
Mainstream media.
Right. I think it's, I've been around for a long time. And when I started out, I mean, I think what got me excited in journalism is one big story by one or two journalists could change the course of history. And whether it was Watergate or the Pentagon Papers or the My Lai massacre, I mean, you had stories that just took over the country. And I mean, when Watergate happened, this was the beginning of binge watching. Everyone would rush home from work to watch the Senate hearings, and there was a shared national narrative. Part of it was we all shared the same set of facts. We shared the same factual reality. And that's no longer true. And there have been several reasons for it. And one, of course, is technology. And in my lifetime, we went from 3 TV channels with broadcast TV to 600 with cable TV, tens of thousands or even millions with the internet. And then with social media, it's as if everyone entered impenetrable silos and they were all talking to each other and reinforcing their own views, impervious to factual reality. You know, I remember in 1968 when Walter Cronkite announced that, wait a minute, we're losing the Vietnam War. This is a disaster. We've got to get out. And everyone trusted him. We had the same set of facts. That was a real inflection point that you remember. Well, it's nearly 60 years later. Today, or the My Lai massacre, we used to think of American soldiers as heroes who stormed the beaches of Normandy to save Europe. And with the My Lai massacre, you saw American soldiers really conducting Nazi-like atrocities, gunning down hundreds of women and children. So those kind of stories just change the entire national conversation. Today, you say the president's a Russian asset. Ho-hum, no one listens, really. He's a rapist. So, you know, is that really so important? I mean, and then Steve Bannon floods his own strategy where there's 17 scandals an hour, so you can't possibly follow all of them and know what is actually true and sort out the allegations from factual reality. And those are some of the problems that are going on now. And I think it makes the press incredibly ineffective. I mean, the question becomes, well, what happens next? And you do see the rise of platforms like Substack, which do give millions of people like me or whatever a chance to really have a voice. I mean, but the question even there is, look at the owners of Substack and you have to wonder, will they pull the rug out from under it in the way Elon Musk did with Twitter? I mean, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, it was during the 2024 campaign. Mm-hmm. And in buying it, he effectively made a $44 billion campaign contribution to President Trump.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. I want to stick with the 2016 Russian influence and essentially the Mueller report. So I can't remember when that actually finally came out, and it was a bit brushed under the rug, if you will, by Bill Barr. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, there were several problems with it. And I think one is early on, even before William Barr got to it, Robert Mueller met with Rod Rosenstein, who then I think was acting attorney general or deputy attorney general. I'm not sure which. But Rosenstein said, listen, this is not a counterintelligence investigation. It's a criminal investigation. And those two things, I'm not sure Americans realize how different they are. A crime is when you're really breaking the law and, you know, you rob a bank or whatever. And so he was saying that Mueller had to find something that could be a prosecutable crime that Trump had committed. Trump is very careful about this way. This is one way in which he is rather smart. He knows, one thing I was talking about money laundering early on. Well, when Trump is laundering money and it's from a member of the Russian mafia, you can bet he does not ask the buyer, gee, did you get your money from sex trafficking? And there's a legal term called willful blindness or deliberate ignorance, something like that. And that's one thing Trump has mastered. I don't like to report what's going on in his mind because I don't really know unless he says it himself. And it's virtually impossible to prosecute him for money laundering. And yet you have, as I said earlier, 13 members of the Russian mafia living or having bought condos in the president's home building, the crown jewel of his empire. That is a major national security breach. And so Mueller couldn't deal with stuff like that. He had to find a prosecutable crime. And even then, he did find a lot that was very dubious. And I think the more relevant document, and I cited before, was the investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee, which again, this is a Republican Senate committee, and the acting chairman was Marco Rubio. And he was very clear that they did find a collusion with Russian. And I mean, this has been completely overlooked. Another problem with it, and before I forget, you're absolutely right that William Barr completely underplayed it, and he got a copy before you did. Hard to believe. And he read it and he reframed it as saying that there was really nothing in it.
Yep, nothing is here. Nothing is
It's all
here.
done. Let's move along. And in
Right.
fact, there's a lot of material that shows that there really, that Trump had an enormous number of contacts with the Russian mafia. You can also see, and I mean, I've been working on this. I hope to post something on my Substack in the next few days, but talking with a former FBI agent, Jonathan Buma, who became a whistleblower in the FBI, because every time he turned up stuff that might hurt Trump, or in some cases, Rudy Giuliani, people within the FBI was saying, no, don't. They tried to bury it. And there was a lot of that going on within the FBI. I mean, to me, allowing Donald Trump, an asset of Russian intelligence, to become president of the United States, to me, that is as big a counterintelligence failure as there's ever been in American history. Maybe the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. But, this is really epic on a monstrous level, and the FBI let it happen. It was going on under their noses. Why did they let it happen? And you start to see the Russians reached out to infect the FBI as well. If you remember, William Sessions was director of the FBI, and after he retired from the FBI, he went back to practicing law, and one of his first clients was none other than Semyon Mogilevich, who is one of the big bosses of the Russian mafia. He was known as the Brainy Don. He was in charge of all their money laundering and various financial schemes. He hired William Sessions. Another director of the FBI was Louis B. Free. As soon as he retired, he also got a big Russian client, one of which was Prevezon, which, if you're familiar with the Magnitsky scandal and William Browder's account of that, it was Prevezon who stole all the money from Browder's company, which was, I think, was Hermitage. And, you have the FBI is working for the bad guys. Imagine what that does to you if you're a special agent for the FBI investigating Russia. You might think, gee, maybe I could get a job with these guys. I'm not going to take them down right now.
Ugh, it's so corrupt. It's like these are supposed to be the guys that are protecting us and saving us from all these bad guys, and they are the bad guys. Not all of them, but
right. And it's very hard to get the information out. I was lucky enough to publish 2 books on the subject, both of which were bestsellers. But, not that many people read books. You're lucky if 300,000 people or so read a book in a country of more than nearly 350 million.
yeah. So actually, on that note, I do have a question I was going to ask you because I am a filmmaker and I recently saw some Substack and somebody was talking about mainly Epstein, and they were saying that like the studio system will never touch this story, trying to make it into a film, like a big blockbuster film. And it's similar to the media that doesn't want to touch, they don't want to piss off anybody with deep pockets. But I don't care. I'm an independent filmmaker and I want to make this movie. So what would the movie look like if you were going to make something that was like from all your research?
Well, this is a sprawling, having writing these books, I realize a book has a narrative scope that is like a big mini series. It's more than, it's really hard to squeeze it
It would
in.
have to be a miniseries. Fair.
You can't squeeze it into 90 minutes. And even then, there are so many different stories to tell. You could tell the story of Leon Black, this multi-billionaire, and his downfall. There's also, I've been investigating some of the offshore stuff, which has not gotten as much publicity. But, a lot of what Epstein was doing involved offshore financing. And if you look at the world of offshore wealth, and a lot of this has to do with money laundering and mafia money and all sorts of things. But there's as much as $60 trillion in money in these offshore banks. And that's twice the economy of the United States of America. And three of the biggest figures in that world were Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and Jeffrey Epstein. And the ascent of crypto makes it much easier to transfer money into this world.
It was crypto was basically born as a corrupt like shady, non-traceable type of financing, right?
I'm really not an expert on it, but it's interesting that one of the first things Trump did when he got back in office during his second term was he started World Liberty Finance, which is sort of an exchange for dealing with crypto. So he'll get a slice of any of the transactions that take place.
Well, speaking of someone who's gotten a slice, I want to touch a little bit on one of your other books, The House of Saud, and Jared Kushner. We know that at the end of the last term, Jared just randomly got $2 billion from the Saudis. He's now very involved in our foreign policy. He's over there right now trying to, with one of your favorite subjects, Steve Witkoff, with trying to resolve the war in Iran. So could you talk a little bit about Jared and his family's connections with these folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of amazing. One is when Trump has a difficult or really important foreign policy issue he has to resolve, he completely obviates the State Department, the whole diplomatic corps, and he puts in two real estate developers, right? Witkoff and Kushner, one of whom's his son-in-law. And if you look at the real estate deals, essentially what's going on, I mean, there's at least in Gaza, in Albania, and in Russia and Iran, bomb the hell out of everything and then make a real estate deal to rebuild it. And that's essentially what he's doing. So there's no real diplomacy going on. Kushner the whole family is quite extraordinary. Charlie Kushner, his father, of course, is ambassador to France now. And there's a wonderful interview with Chris Christie online somewhere. It's worth digging up. But Chris Christie, whatever you think, he can tell a terrific story. And people forget he was the United States Attorney in New Jersey. And as such, he prosecuted Charlie Kushner. And of course, it was for this wonderful deal. Kushner's brother-in-law had agreed to testify against Kushner, and Kushner wanted to bring him down. So he hired an escort to seduce Kushner and set it up with a hidden camera, and then sent the tape into the U.S. attorney to get his own brother-in-law arrested. And Christie, of course, was a prosecuting attorney, and he tells the story far, far better than I am. But at one point, he had to meet with, I guess it was Kushner's sister, who was married to the man in question. And she immediately told Christie, you know who did this? Charlie did. Charlie Kushner did it. You know what? My husband has a weakness, and Charlie preys on weaknesses. There's no question in my mind that he did it. And it did lead to Kushner's indictment and conviction. But now, of course, he is running around France as an ambassador.
I think it was about the property in Manhattan. The address is 666, which is like
right.
too up. I don't know if that's actually why Charlie got indicted, but there was some money laundering or some bad real estate deal going on with that specific property that Jared got caught up in, right?
Right. Well, Jared spent much, much too money for that. He spent, I think, $2 billion for that, and way overpaid for it. And he's sort of been bailed out by the Saudis. And all of this is sort of interesting how it comes to a head now with the Iran war, because, we've sort of had these alliances with Oman, Kuwait, all the GCC nations, but suddenly they're being bombed by Iran. And I don't think they're very happy about that. And that's really our fault,
I mean, not our fault, but it's America's
Donald
fault.
Trump's fault, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. This is so great. But the Mueller report was interesting because I think, to your point, it had been brushed under the rug or whatever, or it wasn't strong enough to penetrate the zeitgeist of our media and the regular societal understanding. And unfortunately, because there was really a lot of bad stuff, and there was definitely Russia collusion in my book, even if it didn't meet the definition of a criminal conspiracy, which is why it didn't have legs. But in a way, it's information laundering, if you will. I don't know if that's a real term.
Well, it's also that espionage, spies try not to break the law. They don't have to break the law. So you
Right.
can't really prosecute them. What they want to do is gather information and influence people, and they have very specific tasks they want to do. And with Trump, they won him over. I mean, these two books together, I mean, this one shows how the Russian mafia wooed him over the years and started laundering money through him and so forth. The other one shows how it was Russian intelligence, first the KGB and on and on. And again, so much of this is in plain sight, and it's not at all illegal. Remember when Trump, as a candidate, had his first foreign policy presentation. He had a big press conference where he was a presidential candidate, and he's saying, this is my foreign policy. And it was put on by Dmitry Simes, who is well known to be an asset of Russian intelligence. But that's not illegal, and it really wasn't reported much. And the reporting, to the extent it took place, didn't penetrate. I mean, again, one of the great failures, I think, of American journalism is that if it's not strictly speaking illegal, they let it drop. If there's no trial, there's no indictment, there's no prosecution going on, they say, oh, well, that's not important. Well, I think it is important that Donald Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, got $75 million from Putin and Putin's oligarchs. That should be a big deal. I mean, it used to be the Republicans were the first to be anti-Russian and stand up for Ukraine and so forth. And suddenly in that 2016 Republican National Convention, they switched sides. I mean, is that just another coincidence? It's just happening again and again and again. And $75 million, that's something. That's not nothing. I mean,
And they removed the anti-Russia language from the Republican platform.
the original platform said that the Republicans would arm Ukraine with the appropriate weapons, and the language has changed to be much, much weaker than that.
Yeah, yeah. And even now in 2026, I've been recently, I don't know, my algorithm has shifted me over to some more libertarian type podcasts. And I won't say the names, but I've noticed that a couple of people, they were talking to each other and they both agreed that they called, the Russian hoax, and that it was all the Democrats set up. And they were basically, they had completely laundered the information. And I was like, fuck. And they were basically saying there were other liberal podcast hosts and stuff like that are talking about this too, and saying essentially that whole Russia thing was totally bullshit. And I think one of them even said that it only ended up being that the Russians spent $50,000 on like bots or whatever for social media for Facebook that year, and that was it, and that basically the Mueller report was a bunch of bullshit. So what do you say to that, Craig?
Well, this is one reason why I'm sticking with it. And I started that book more than 10 years ago, So this is old news to me. And it's time to move on. And I wrote another book, Den of Spies, since then. But I am going back to this because we are at war with Russia. We're still at war. And what the rest of the press does much, much too often, and I'm probably repeating myself, but I think sometimes you have to, is that because the prosecutions are over, it meant that Trump was successful in shutting down the prosecution. That doesn't mean they were wrong. And I think it's more important than ever to redouble our efforts and get to the bottom of things, not to just forget about it and say, we lost that one or it's a hoax. No, it's not a hoax. And I mean, we've been lifting sanctions on Russia under Trump since he came back into office for his oil trade through India. He has stopped the flow of the American arms to Ukraine. It's amazing that Ukraine has done so well, and I think they really seem to be actually winning the war, to the amazement of everyone.
It really is amazing and wonderful.
But it's no thanks to us. I went to Finland recently, and I gave a talk before. These were intelligence officials from Finland, Estonia, all the Baltic nations. And I said that Trump was an asset of Russian intelligence. And I realized this is virtually taboo in the United States, but it's just, of course, ho-hum to them. They knew it all the time. And we have to be able to penetrate that, the blockage of that kind of information in this country. And It's very difficult to do so. I mean, the mainstream media, is disintegrating before our eyes, and what's left of it is being taken over by the right. We've had Trump allies take over CBS, and if you followed the demise, the issues at CBS 60 Minutes, and now they're doing the same with CNN, and Fox News, as it is, has already been America's Pravda.
I just want to get it straight in my own head and maybe our listeners. And I'll just preface this by saying there is so much amazing information in your books, all of your books, and your Substack. So we're going to link to all of those in our show notes. So everybody needs to read all of that stuff because that's where all the good stuff is. And appreciate you giving us a little taste on this. And so in order to, so I'm just going to name drop some names that were confusing to me, both from your work as well as some stuff that came out of the Epstein files and the research that has happened in the last few months from the big drop at the end of January. So there are some Dugans. There's some Dugans and there's a Dubin. So I think, so can you just help us?
There's also a Dubin.
Okay. And there's a Dubinina. So let's explain all of these Dugans and Dubins and Dubininas. So
Okay.
Take it away.
Wow. You're really, this is like a pop quiz or something, right?
I know. Let's do Alexander Dugan first, the Russian political philosopher.
He's sort of and I'm using big air quotes, the great thinker, the Steve Bannon of Russia, I would say. Is that fair enough? And he's not to be confused with Yuri Dubinin, was Soviet ambassador to the United Nations and then to the United States, and his daughter was Natalia Dubinina. And together, the two of them sort of wooed Trump back in the mid-1980s, and they helped arrange his first trip to Moscow. And then you're probably also thinking of, I'm trying to remember his first name, but it's Dubin, who was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein.
Glenn Dubin and his wife.
Right.
Ava.
And they were close friends of Jeffrey Epstein, who dated, again, air quotes, Dubin's wife. And I think they're probably worth drilling down and finding out the real story on them. They were immensely wealthy billionaires yet who were close to Epstein. And it's just extraordinary that people like them, to my knowledge, have not been interrogated by the FBI.
Yeah, these people need to testify, or the Congress hasn't called them in, WTF. Okay, there's one more. So let me see if I can sneak back into the back cobwebs of your brain. John Mark Dugan, Dougan. Do you remember him?
Of course I do. How can I forget John Mark Dugan? John Mark Dugan was deputy sheriff in Palm Beach County. And by all accounts, including his, and I did spend hours interviewing him, he was not well liked in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, and he was fired. But after he was fired, he told me while he was there, they were investigating Jeffrey Epstein. This is around 2004 or 5 or so. And Dugan told me, and this is where I start taking things with a grain of salt, but he said one of the other investigators with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department said, look, I'm afraid they're going to shut down the investigation. I want you to have these for safekeeping. And he was given, he told me, I believe it was 678 sex tapes or so. He actually showed me one of them, and I'm not sure what to make of it because one, it was in very grainy black and white, which suggests technology from at least 30 years ago or so. And two is, I didn't know who the guy was. He told me it was a media executive I'd never heard of. Maybe he was, maybe not, but I couldn't verify it. In any case, when I talked to Dugan, he told me how the FBI was after him. So he took all his so-called sex tapes, got across the border into Canada, and took the first plane he could from Toronto to Moscow. And this was on his Facebook page. He ends up meeting with a guy named Pavel Borodin. Pavel Borodin is a highly placed official in Putin's government, and he's in charge of all government property in the Russian Federation, which is billions and billions of dollars worth of property. And there he is in this photo with John Mark Dugan, which suggests to me that certainly Dugan was trying to make a deal with Russia, or he was operating on behalf of Russia in some way. But there are an awful lot of unanswered questions there.
I think John Mark Dugan has defected officially from the United States to Russia and is now a Russian citizen, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm very happy for him.
He and Edward Snowden can hang out.
Yeah, he can
Yeah.
hang with Edward Snowden. And actually, I think you mentioned it, but I just want to reinforce. So he was working on the investigation, the one where Epstein got the sweetheart deal in Palm Beach County. So he was in on, like, he had access to all of the files and everything that they had confiscated for that at that time.
Right, and it certainly raises the larger question of if Epstein had cameras all over the place, where are these tapes? I mean, is it possible the FBI doesn't have any of them? And they've never really answered questions about this. And when I see Cash Patel on TV, it doesn't seem like he's really trying to get them.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be working that hard on that anymore. Like, he was really into that before he became part of the actual administration. But now
Well,
he's
we
like,
know that they've been having meetings now in the Situation Room with Vance and Susie Wiles, and they're not working for justice. And Kash Patel is
yeah,
just a clown.
Yeah.
he's a chud. Yeah. And so we just recently found out about that meeting from last June or July when they were doing damage control in the war room of the White House about Epstein and like not wanting to get the Epstein stink on Donald Trump or what have you. Too late. So this goes back to our media conversation that, these two intrepid journalists from the New York Times, they probably knew about that like shortly after it happened and they withheld that information for their book. And, I think the Epstein survivors are not that happy about it. And I think one could make an argument, maybe I will right now, that, we need our journalists to like tell the truth to the American people when they come across like really interesting information that's very relevant to what's going on right now.
Yep.
This is really kind of off topic, but I really appreciate that you have supported and helped with Emily's List and the folks that are behind helping get more women candidates out there. So tell us a little bit more about that. The feminist in me wants to know.
Right. Well, I worked with Ellen Malcolm, who founded Emily's List, and it really was her story and her book. And I mean, we collaborated on it, but it's really extraordinary what she's done. And, if you realize back when she started, forget if it was before or after and the exact number of years, but it wasn't that long ago, but there was only Barbara Mikulski from Maryland was the very first woman senator from the Democratic Party in the United States Senate. And by the time Ellen and I wrote the book, I think there were 19, which is, when you consider the Democrats are not in the majority, that's nearly half of the Democratic contingent, which is quite something. And Emily's List, I don't know if people understand it, but the name it's an anagram for the phrase, early money is like yeast. And the idea was people like Barbara Mikulski were always discouraged from running because they didn't have any money. But if you go into a campaign and say, look, I've already got a war chest of $1 million, the Democratic Party will take you a little more seriously. So that was Ellen's strategy, and she was very successful at it. And it's also, you realize women, I did have one day where I interviewed, I think, 6 women senators in one day. We were running from one office to another. And it was sort of extraordinary because you realize that they really were more effective, I think, and they were less concerned about their egos, more willing to, try to make something work rather than just doing something that would serve their own specific interests.
I love it. Yeah, that's wonderful. I did not actually know the acronym for Emily. That's wonderful. I didn't fully, but thank you for sharing that with us and our audience. And thank you for helping support women.
Telling the truth about what Trump and the Russians have been up to for the past 40 years. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a story that has to be exposed.
I'm older than you guys, and the first movie I really, really loved was The Manchurian Candidate, the original one, not the repeat, with Frank Sinatra and Angela Lansbury and so forth. But the idea, this was the apotheosis of Cold War paranoia, the idea that communists could get inside the highest reaches of power. It was just shocking, beyond belief. Our whole way of life would be shattered. And yet here it is happening in front of our eyes, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. And half the country is brainwashed, as it were. I mean,
Mhm.
and Rupert Murdoch had a lot to do with that as well as the Russians.
Yeah, I mean, I think since the Epstein files have come out, we don't know all the details, but it seems very likely that there's a lot of complicity in Congress on both sides, honestly. And that's, I think, the explanation for why not anybody's doing anything. And maybe these guys are like being blackmailed. Maybe they're just going along to get along because the tide is moving in that direction or moving in the corruption direction. Or both, or some combination thereof, or they're just corrupt and making money off of the backs of this entire corruption scheme. So I don't know, but they need to go. We need to get some good politicians in there.
Yep. Some fighting Democrats.
Some fighting Democrats for sure. And even the ex-MAGA Republicans, if we want to bring the saneness back to the Republican Party ever, then they need to step up. Yeah.
Terms are only months away now, so we have the opportunity to do that. So everyone make sure to vote, register new voters, serve as a poll worker if you're able. If you're able to run for office, fantastic. So we'll end on some action items that we can actually do. I can't imagine what your blood pressure is, Mr. Unger, because telling the story over and over again for so long must just be so frustrating. So thank you for persevering.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks once again, everyone, for joining us for the Empathy Avengers podcast, where kindness is your superpower and empathy saves the day.
The Empathy Avengers, where we put empathy into action.